as much as, so I think we all have like this idea of what like a healthy relationship looks like and what type of relationship we want to be in. Um, but what I have learned realistically is that when you're working from that type of dynamic where you're kind of recreating the same household, in a sense, that's what you want. That is what you want. Um, and I'm saying that in a way that I want to be seen as, I want to go beyond the words that I'm saying of that's what you want. Because what I mean by that is you are so familiar with this dynamic. This feels the best in a sense, even if you want to get away from it, even if it's something that doesn't feel good. It still is so familiar, and you have recreated it for that purpose. So even when we attempt to move out of that space, into something quote unquote better, healthier, that feels very foreign and uncomfortable. So I have really learned that like this idea that I have of what I want, it isn't really what my body wants, at that time. It's like a vision. I aspire over here to do that. But my system, that I created can't handle that right now. With where I've been. So that I've learned that like the road basically between where your dynamic is like right now versus that aspirational place is really long. I've learned that that's a really long road.
Do you feel like it was a trauma bond that you've trauma bonded to people? Because what you're saying, when you're saying that, I'm seeing just kind of like just the science behind that. When our nervous systems are attached as a baby, if we have trauma as a child, that can become familiar. So like what you're saying is I'm seeing that grow up, I'm basically looking for my abuser again. And so I'm trying to date my abuser. I'm trying to date my dad, or I'm trying to be my mom, or, something like that. But rationally, I don't want to do any of the things that this person and this person did. But my actions, when I step back and look at my behavior, I'm doing the exact same things that they did. So I feel like that because of that, we trauma bond to people, maybe places and things, but definitely people. And I wanted to know if you feel like that's happened in your relationship.
So I've always been a little bit unclear about what trauma bonding, like when people say that in a like a social, way. I've always been unclear about what people really mean by that term.
So what I mean by it is basically, like I was saying, in our brain, as infants, we experienced this trauma. And so based on the characteristics of our abuser, sometimes people, shy away from that type of characteristics, or some people turn to that characteristic. So then if I grow up and I'm attaching versus connecting, then I call that a trauma bond, where we bonded over weed, right? We both smoke and we have nothing else in common. I aspire to be this way, you aspire to be this way. And we have nothing else in common except this negative thing that we use to cope, or accept the fact that both of our parents did this to us, or, something like that.
Mhm.
And the city from there. And we have these spurt moments when we're doing the bonding thing
Mhm.
of anything else.
So I just call those attachment patterns. um, I guess I never, yeah, I just call those attachment patterns for me, and that's just based on the work that I do. Um,
Hmm.
so, for instance, if someone grew up in a household, because the idea about attachment theory is just those earliest connections, that those earliest relationships really go on to impact all your other relationships.
Right.
And so if kind of like the idea that if you weren't responded to when you really needed care, and you were turned away from, or your emotional self was never even acknowledged, so it's like there's this surface part of you and everything else underneath here like never was acknowledged, and then that goes on to impact a person.
Hmm.
That goes on to essentially tell that person that that's not safe to really go beyond that. And so maybe in the world, someone would say that that person is like has an avoidant attachment style, for instance. um so I do believe in that. I think I just don't use the term trauma bond. But so what was your original question about that?
So I was wanting to know if you've seen yourself in that situation of,
Okay.
just attaching in that way.
Absolutely. Hmm.
How do you Okay, so first, I believe I attach too. I'm codependent, um, and I try to keep that on a healthier scale. But is there a healthy scale? Like, is there a healthy side to attachment, or what's the difference? And what's the difference between attachment versus connection?
That's a good question. So is there a healthy scale? I think that that's really very personal,
Mm,
to what that means. For you, something that feels great, and also, there's the idea of like, if it feels great, does that mean that it's good? Because history and all that stuff, right? The historical piece of your family,
mm,
but I do believe that the idea of whether or not it's healthy is very personal to you, and what your dreams and desires are for yourself, for your values. I think that's very personal to that. Whether the difference between like connection and attachment, I do believe that kind of socially people do differentiate the two. Um, the idea is, that a connection is something that's mutual, it's something that's desired, it's seen as positive, whereas the idea of attachment is seen as codependent, like you mentioned, is seen as negative. So they're kind of on the opposite, you know, ends of the spectrum in terms of like kind of being in the same room, but meaning, having like a different purpose.
different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that I think again, so I specifically do attachment work. So that's why I have you know, I when I use the word attachment, I don't have a value with it. It's just is. I'm not thinking of it in terms of negative or positive. It just is. And there's a particular type of pattern that someone may have had based on those early relationships.
Mm-hmm. So are you helping them find their patterns?
Help them find their patterns, help them to shift their patterns. Yeah, help
Okay.
accept their patterns. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I know you in your practice. Have you started your own practice?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I was going on the website. um, so what's your mission behind your practice?
The mission is, so I don't have like a, like an actual mission, or I do, but what I'm saying is I don't have a, how people have like an actual mission, like my mission says
A statement, yeah.
statement. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't have a statement, but the mission behind the work that I do is I am I'm creating a kind of friendly space for people to be able to show up in a really seriously vulnerable way, or not, or not, and to be able to shift those patterns so that those interactions that they continue to find themselves in over and over again, that don't feel good, or that feel good and they feel like, and I think by the time that they're approaching therapy, it's because it doesn't feel good anymore. Maybe it did, but now it doesn't. And now I'm noticing that all of my relationships look the same. And, I'm noticing that this always ends up happening, or I'm noticing that I'm never vulnerable, or I'm noticing that actually my partner is never vulnerable. Whatever it is that, it's being noticed, it has stopped feeling good. If it once did, it has stopped feeling good. And people are not able to do this work on their own. And so now they're coming. And my mission is to help them see those patterns, even from prior to them being able to notice it. Sometimes those connections aren't quite made yet. I do this, I don't know why. Where did this come from? So helping them find those connections. Also, sometimes there may not be a why, but still being able to shift by recreating those experiences, like we talked about. Having a space to recreate those experiences.
That is so important. Yes, and basically we've been saying it wrong, guys. It's attachment styles. It's not trauma bonds, but it's essentially that's what we're saying, because like you're saying, finding those patterns typically happen in childhood, and um it created some type of trauma, and so we call it a trauma bond, but it's still the same thing. Is there more than one attachment style?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's secure, which is seen as the elite, type of style. It's seen as the style. Well, I won't say elite. Well, yeah, in a sense, the way that the world views it, because it's what people want to lean towards. Everyone wants to move towards a secure attachment. Um, there's disorganized, there is avoidant, and there's anxious. Disorganized is a combination of avoidant and anxious. There
Mm.
are four types.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so does that go with the personality types, or personality disorders? Can different personality disorders be one of these four attachments?
So people, no matter what their personality type is, or is it Enneagram,
Yeah, that too. Not that though. Like, for example, I haven't been
ENFP.
diagnosed with anything, but
Oh,
this dissociative
this
identity disorder.
one.
I disassociate, but I feel like I do it like a normal amount. I feel like everybody disassociates at some point. When you're washing the dishes or you're driving home, you go somewhere and then
Right.
you just end up there. So I don't think I think that everything is a balance. I feel like they put the label on it once it gets completely unbalanced and you aren't able to handle it for a long amount of time. But does that mean that a person who has, OCD or personality, or, one of these things, um, are they also one of these attachment types?
So any of those can be, so anyone within, any of the personality clusters, A, B, or
Mm-hmm.
C, can all be in, can be a certain person or be a certain attachment pattern, can
Mm-hmm.
have a certain attachment pattern. Um, Sometimes, yeah, I'm going to say that anybody really who, wherever they are, can be within any of those attachment styles. So they're not going to necessarily correlate in that way, so a
Mm-hmm.
person who, um, who is, um, avoidant is definitely one of these personality, has a personality disorder. That's not, it doesn't
That's,
correlate in that way. Right.
okay.
But I will say though that if, for instance, like borderline personality disorder, typically, or narcissistic personality disorder, for instance, just an example. There there are, the beliefs that narcissism, for instance, was born in childhood. The person who has narcissistic
Mhm.
personality disorder, they do so because of, their childhood.
Yeah.
In that case, that probably likely created a type of attachment style based on, because if you're someone who has narcissism because of the way that you were raised, then it could be that you don't have a secure attachment, you know, because you have because you were raised in such a way that gave you a personality disorder. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
does that make sense? Like, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, because it's overindulging. A narcissist comes from either overindulging or underindulging. So, based on the type of narcissist it is, that will kind of match it up with the type of attachment style. Because overindulging, maybe attachment, but attachment is supposed to be as secure as that first attachment. So you're super grandiose and focused on self. But then if you are underindulged, maybe you're super anxious, or who's the other one? The mix of the two.
Disorganized.
Disorganized, yes. So you can kind of be one of those if you were under cared for, nurtured, or what have you. So
Mhm.
I see a correlate. I feel like everything is connected. That's why I'm always asking. But I can see how it is also differences. And it makes me wonder, is it something that you move, like maybe if I started as avoidant, could I slowly but surely move into a different attachment style?
Yes, you can move into a different attachment style if you are able to process some of those, or a good bit of that, those rooted experiences,
Mm,
really processing them, really getting to the root of them with some, specific brain body based therapy. So if you're rewiring in that way, then yes, you can likely, move along the spectrum. Um, so there's some beliefs around that though, because one, it is spectromatic, although there are four technically, I don't believe in anything fully. So even though like this is
mm,
what this is what I do when I study it, it's still a theory. Attachment theory is a theory. And so there's the idea that you can, likely move between them, that you might be one, for instance, a person who is disorganized. The idea is that, if you're with someone who's a bit more avoidant, then that anxious part of you kicks up because they're avoidant. And then vice versa. If you're with someone who's a bit more anxious, then the avoidant side of you kicks in. So you can show up differently and within different relationships, within different spaces, depending on the type of work you've already done, you know um, and still with it being on a spectrum, two people who claim to have a secure attachment style, that still might look different for them, within their relationships, or any other attachment style, like that's going to look different for each of those people in a relationship, in an intimate partnership.
Oh my goodness. You are just dropping just knowledge right now. And I'm just so happy that you've come and spoken to us. Um, I
Me
hope
too.
that we get you again. We're doing panels every fourth Friday of the month. There is a panel. So I would love for you to join.
Okay.
Um, I have different topics. I'm slowly but surely building a list of topics. But this was just such a good conversation, and I want people to reach out to you, follow you. Can you let people know where they can follow you at and get your information and connect with you?
Sure. So on Instagram, people can follow me at Keisha Barnes LCSW. KeishaBarnes LCSW. Um, right? I think that's right. Keisha Barnes .lcsw. Okay. LCSW. um,
Okay.
yeah, and then on my Instagram, my link to my website is in the bio. So yeah, that's another way to contact me.
Link in bio. All right. Yes. I'm also going to put everything in the description box so you guys will easily be able to access it. So I just have a speed round of questions for you.
Okay.
Um, to end us off, what does healing mean to you?
Ooh. Healing is never finished. I think it means that it's never finished. Like to me that's what it means. It's never finished. It's a journey. Um, yeah, it's a never finished journey.
I love it. What does healing your spirit mean to you?
Dancing. It's the first thing that popped into my mind.
You said dancing.
Dancing. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Me too. Okay, because just okay. And then what does healing your finances mean to you?
To me, healing my finances, I think it's really about being really patient and having a plan and being patient with your plan, not turning your back on your plan.
Mm, okay, that was good. I love that. And I gotta ask myself, what is my answer to that? But okay. That was awesome. So just leave us with a word of wisdom as we're healing through our traumas, and we we don't really know what's next, but we're here, we're willing, and we're listening to you.
Okay. There is a girl on Instagram. I don't know. I can't recall her name right now, but she does these plaques out of like mosaics, like a
Mhm.
tile, and she puts certain wordings, in them, and you can request to have something put, in the tile. And for a while, I've been thinking that I want to order one, and I want it to say "Here with you," and that is a thought that I have been having a lot with myself. I've told a lot of other people that, just in general, and when I've been in session with people. And I realized that I needed to hear that myself, here with you, like I'm here with you. So,
I really love that. Yes. I think that one of the biggest things that we all want to do is be seen and heard. So
mm,
having somebody here with us and knowing that they're here for us, that's beautiful.
mm,
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
thank you
I
for being
cannot wait to see what else you're doing. I'm just so glad that we got to connect. I found her on Instagram, so you better go find her too. Uh, and if you guys haven't already, make sure you do some healing today. So, peace and healing, guys. We are out. Peace.